Good morning, friends. Welcome to episode 34 of the Volpe Creates show for July 8th, 2026. I'm your host, Chris. I am not joined by Baby Girl today because she is out with her mommy, although Pumpkin may make an appearance. Hopefully you all are doing well. I want to remind folks about GDEX, our game development. Oh, speak of the devil. Here's Pumpkin. Of our professional game development conference and expo that's happening October 15th through the 18th here in Columbus, Ohio. We welcome everybody. We get people from across the country. You can go to thegdex.com to check that out. So just wanted to let folks know, a little reminder about that as we are planning. And then also on Wednesdays at noon Eastern time, I also do the Sandbox.space podcast. The Sandbox.space is our professional development Discord community. So you can join that for free. You can go to thesandbox.space/Discord and be able to join that. Good morning, Tom. Thanks for joining. So today I wanted to talk about a few things. It's funny, I mentioned I was going to do a Game Informer. I've got my new Game Informer. Oh my God, I got too much stuff on my desk. Magazines. I actually just got a second one before I even got a chance to open the first one. So I think maybe tomorrow we'll walk through the Game Informer magazines. I think it's fun to just open those up and check them out, kind of see what's going on. But today I wanted to talk about gaming as a luxury. So I was born 1981. I'm a first-year millennial. So I grew up in the 80s and 90s when the video game industry was just kind of starting to find its place. And for those who maybe know a little video game history, Pumpkin's knocking everything. The video game crash of 1983 was one of those moments where a lot of people felt that, video games were over, it was the end, and it was kind of like a passing fad, right? Keep in mind at that time, 1983, there were very few computers. Like no one really had a computer in their home. Most of the game consoles were, very simple games. So there were arcades. So you saw arcades and pinball parlors were big in the 70s into the 80s. But the general idea was that this electronic thing was a fad. People aren't just going to keep playing games. People are going to want to go outside. They're going to want to go and interact with, each other and touch grass, as it were, which is true. All well and good, and it's true. But I think they drastically underestimated just the power of what the games industry could be and is. But the games industry was nothing like it was today. All the companies were trying to figure themselves out. Nintendo, arguably the sort of savior of the video game crash of 1983. But you also had Sega starting to pop up towards the middle to late 90s. And then, of course, you had, your Atari and ColecoVisions and all of that. You had your Magnavox Odysseys. But it was sort of like a Wild West time, right? People were trying to figure out what gaming could even be. Technology as a whole was shifting dramatically. In the early 80s, you had the beginning of your DOS, PCs. You also had your Apple IIs. 1984 is when the Apple Macintosh first came out. And so everything was just new. People were just constantly testing technology and seeing what they could make out of it. But there wasn't like a clear, understood business model like there is today. Even though I think you could argue that there is not a clear business model today. People are just making it up and trying to grab as many dollary dues as they can. But all of that meant that all of these companies were just trying to get people into the system, right? So there was not really a... Hold on, sorry. Turn that off real fast. Sorry about that. But there was not really this clear path for somebody playing or somebody wanting to get into the system. How do you get them into your ecosystem? How do you sell games to them? The idea of third-party and first-party exclusives was beginning to start. I mean, even the idea of third-party developers as a whole was relatively new. That was something Atari didn't even really want, third-party developers. And so that's one of the things that ended up costing them, because as Nintendo found out, it's actually really good to have third-party developers, because then you can have people making your games for you, and you don't have to be the only one developing your products. Now, of course, that comes with other risks and work and efforts and whatever. But the point here is that the games industry grew largely in part that it was starting at zero. And so every time there was a new console, there was generally a pretty big technological leap. And so there's always something new and cool to discover, going from 8-bit, for example, to 16-bit. So the Nintendo to the Super Nintendo had a very noticeable graphics improvement with it, as well as just being able to do larger games, more expansive titles, and whatnot. Then you started going from the Super Nintendo to like the Nintendo 64 era into the PlayStation and PS2 eras, with a big focus on 3D games. So you're going from 2D sprite sheet stuff into 3D games. And that was all cool. But one of the things that almost just happened by sort of accident was that a new generation of gamers was constantly being created. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that's super important. But you had these new generations coming in the 80s, like my generation, coming kind of into the 80s and 90s. They ended up getting older and starting to play more games on PC, or PlayStation in many ways was trying to create content for older gamers, which was awesome. However, as time went on, we begin to see this sort of like fracturing. We lost Sega, and then Xbox filled that role. I've mentioned in previous videos that I think the video game industry has always been strongest when it has three pillars. Right now we have Xbox, who is struggling. We have PlayStation, who seems to be making some bad decisions. And then we have Nintendo, who is always Nintendo. And they kind of come and go. Even though the Switch 2 is selling very well, I know there's a lot of people who felt burned by the Switch, because it... I just realized I didn't have the right logo on here, but I'll have to change that later. Make a little note. But you fast forward to now, and the costs of everything are just becoming just incredible. And what is happening here is that, and we're seeing this in a lot of other industries, the other industries are focusing, and the gaming industry, they're all focusing on the top-end consumers, the affluent consumers, the ones that can... Tina's dropping baby off, so I'm going to have to go down. But they're all focusing on the people that can, spend a lot of money on the products, right? Which makes sense. You go to where the money is. The problem is that when you only focus on the top tier consumers, then you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot. One, because you're just totally giving up on all the other consumers that might come into your ecosystem, might purchase your products or whatever. We're seeing this in Vegas. I bring this up about Las Vegas all the time, where Las Vegas used to be a place for middle-class families to come and spend a weekend checking things out, going to shows, spending time at a hotel, buying food, taking their kids to, like places like Circus. And now everything is just so expensive in Vegas. You can't get anything for free. There's no free drinks anymore. And the costs of just hotels and stuff is so crazy. And we're seeing that replicated in the video game industry, where because of inflation, because of COVID and supply chain issues, but also AI and the SSD and memory issues, GPU costs, everything is just skyrocketing in price. And we've seen consoles increase in price depending on the console, at least twice this generation, which is something that never happened in the past before. Consoles always traditionally used to go down in expense, or at least they would remain the same, but maybe you'd get like little upgrades, like a larger hard drive or something, right? So things are changing. Things are changing a lot. All of this is creating a challenge in getting new players and new consumers into the system. And when you combine that with the fact that mobile, your iPhone and your iPad in particular, is offering tons of different entertainment and gaming experiences, when you're looking at consoles and PCs, this is creating a problem. And so a lot of folks look at games, and I've never really looked at it this way, but I know a lot of people do, is that they look at games from like a cost per hour. And generally, games right now are still a really good value if you're just solely looking at how much you're spending dollar-wise or money-wise per hour. You know, you're spending $60, $70, $80 on a game. A lot of times that game can get you 20, 30 hours of playtime, maybe even longer, depending on the game type. And so, you know, maybe you're spending $2 per hour or $1 per hour, depending on how much you play. That's pretty good, particularly when you compare it to like a movie. You go to a movie and you spend 10 or 12 bucks, even if you're in a high cost of living area, it could be 15 or 20 bucks to go see a movie. And that's what, a 2.5 hour experience. So you're spending $7 to $10 per hour, and that's not counting food. So that could up it to maybe $10 to $15 per hour. So video games, by and large, if you count the console costs or the PC costs, those are, you know, amortize those out, divide those out over time. Gaming is still a pretty good deal, right? And we definitely saw that during COVID when there really wasn't anything else to do. A lot of people spent money on games and spent time in games. That's all well and good. But as the cost of the consoles and the games increases, that dollar per hour value is changing dramatically. And I know a lot of people have been, you know, sort of complaining about the cost of games, you know, being $70, $80. And I get that. I think the consoles, though, are really what's going to end up, the console prices. That's really what's going to end up hurting our industry. And you can extend that to the PC prices if you want, given the current memory and GPU costs. But when you have a console that's $800 to $1,000, and the rumors are, you know, these are rumors, so take them with a grain of salt, that the PS6, PlayStation 6, could be $1,000 console, if not more, before taxes, then what you're also doing is you're cutting off your long-term pipeline for new gamers, new consumers. So if you're charging $500 for a console, which is what the PS5 was at launch, I mean, that's a lot of money, but, you know, it's somewhat reasonable. A teenager could work some time and, you know, get enough money to pay that. But if you're talking $900 or $1,000, I mean, that's a lot of money to put into something. A lot of younger people are just not going to bother doing that. And parents aren't going to bother buying consoles and games at that price. They'll find something else, maybe. And so what you're doing is that you're removing this pipeline that used to be like Nintendo would bring in children into the system, and then Nintendo kind of suffered for a bit because as people aged like me, they stopped. You know, I bought sort of all the Nintendo consoles up into the Switch, but the PlayStation and Xbox were offering more adult-oriented games, and so people were kind of jumping over to that platform. But you're also losing those long-time loyal fans, the ones that come in when they're young and they really like, you know, the properties, and they really have a fond association with, you know, Nintendo, for example. If you're not pulling those people in young, and you're only depending on the people who have only purchased Nintendo stuff in the past and have the loyalty and love of Nintendo and Nintendo's properties, after a while, you're going to start to lose that intro pipeline. And this is further compounded by the lack of the ability to rent games. Again, in the 80s and 90s, you could go to Blockbuster or Hollywood Video or whatever. We had a couple local joints too here that you could get movies and games from. But that was a cheap way for people to get invested into the ecosystem. You go on your Friday after school, you rent your game for the weekend. It's a 2-day rental, and it might cost you $5 or $8 or whatever it was. And then you could spend the weekend playing the game. And then when you're done, you return it. And next weekend, you get a different game, or maybe you get the same game because you haven't finished beating it. That was challenging when the save files were on that specific game, particularly for Nintendo games, and you had to make sure you got the same copy of the game and hope that nobody had rented it in the meantime and had erased your file. And some stores were cool, like they would have on-site, Nintendos that you could put the game in to make sure that was the cartridge you wanted to rent. So you would check it before you rented it. So that was cool. And, it's one of those things that kept the marketplace for the games ecosystem alive. And of course, you had your used game stores and things too. So all of this contributed to being able to bring more people into the ecosystem. And now that the costs of the consoles and everything are so expensive, I mean, you're really at a point where a lot of folks are just not going to be able to participate in this hobby. And now keep in mind, too, that everything I've spoken about here is from a American-centric perspective. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. I'm in America. And so we're talking about pricing and whatnot in the United States. But when you start looking at the other burgeoning, or what traditionally have been considered burgeoning video game industries, so Latin America, Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, some parts of Africa, when you're looking at an $800 to $1,000 console in a country where, you might be making a couple of $100 a month in salary, are you going to be willing to spend 2, 3, 4 months worth of your salary to purchase one of these systems? And that's where things really start to fall apart. You're losing all of the potential folks that could enter into your ecosystem. And I'm telling you right now, American consumers and European consumers, the quote unquote sort of affluent ones within the world, they're not going to be enough to keep your businesses afloat. And as somebody who lives in America, works in the games industry, teaches students about the games industry, and just telling you, me personally, we don't have the extra money to be spending on this. I do not have the money right now to buy, let's say PlayStation 6 comes out next year and it costs $800 to $1,000. I ain't buying it. I'm not spending $1,000 on the PlayStation 6, particularly after all the loss of faith in them that I've had on the physical discs issue that's been going around. And I had a previous video about that a couple of days ago. So it's looking really, really, really rough. And I did a video about the Xbox layoffs yesterday, and one of the things that I didn't mention is that all that talent that's being laid off at Xbox, who's going to be even making these games if you're firing all these people? So it's just from the top to the bottom, it's just all of these issues that are going to be driving up the prices of games, that are going to be making the I guess interest of potential consumers. It's going to kill their interest, and ultimately you're just not going to be able to maintain all of that at the level that we have been in the games industry. You're just not going to be able to do it. And I think we're going to see a real big reckoning with all of these costs. And I'm not quite sure how your Nintendos, your Xboxes, and your PlayStations are going to be able to handle that. We've got a quote. Tom, Nintendo is positioning itself as the cheaper / low entry pillar for the console mobile gaming, whereas Xbox and PlayStation are at the point where you may need to build or upgrade your home computer. Yeah, Nintendo for years, since pretty much since the Switch, has really focused. Or sorry, the Switch, the Wii, has really focused on a lower cost entry for younger gamers. They have not been focusing on power like Xbox and PlayStation has. But even that's not necessarily true, because the Switch 2 is coming in at a $500 price tag as well, and the prices are increasing on those because of the inflation and costs and everything. And so it's getting to a point where this industry that I love, that I find very, very fruitful and very meaningful, is not going to be able to maintain their current budgets and scopes as they've just been used to. And I do worry. I really worry that this is going to lead to a massive crash within the games industry. And that's not even talking about reliance on AI and other things, which we can talk about in another video. But things are looking really, really rough in the games industry. And I got to take a quick pause. I got to go get baby. Be right back. 1 second. I'm back. Apologies about that. Got baby girl here. I'm going to put her down. I think she's going to want to go eat something. But yeah, I mean, we're kind of at the end of our video anyway. I just kind of wanted to talk about that because I don't think that... I don't think the video game industry is going to be able to survive if it is functioning as a luxury item that very few will be able to afford. It's just not going to work out that way. And so ultimately, this industry is going to have to figure out how to survive. And right now, I think it's going into a greed mindset where it's just, resource scarcity. They're trying to grab everything that they can. And it's really funny that the universe is telling us that that is not the way to go. Cutting, 20% of your work staff and losing all your talent is not the way to go. The way to go is to have controlled scope and a good budget and create good products that mean something to people and that are trying to say something and aren't just regurgitating the same crap time after time after time. And we're seeing that continuously. The games, look at Baldur's Gate 3, Claire Obscure, Last of Us. I mean, there's numerous ones. Mixtape that just came out that's doing pretty well. These are games that were made by passionate people that wanted to create something and created something of value. In the movie industry, I mean, just look at Obsession, just crossed $400 million. A movie made for $750,000, directed, first-time director for a theatrical release for Curry Barker, who is a YouTuber. Spend time fostering creatives and supporting creative people that are making interesting things, and your audience will come to them. Yes, you still have to market them and you have to, pay attention to all the markets and all that. But I think they're just trying to hop from trend to trend. And that's not how you create art that is going to last, the test of time. That's just not how you do it. We know that's not how you do it. In all of human history and all of capitalism, we know that's not how you do it. And yet here we are. So that's my thoughts on this for the moment. Feel free to leave any comments in the comment section. If you have any questions, I'll either respond to it or maybe I'll make a mention of it in an upcoming video. But a reminder that you can watch this every day at 9:30 Eastern on Twitch. It's twitch.tv/volpecreates. And then you can go to my Volpe Creates YouTube to watch the videos if you miss them live. Tom's got some last things. Another aspect of rising prices, also cutting staff feels crazy. Last thought here by Tom. Scientists would say not to change more than one variable at a time, and these profit seekers want to change every variable at once. Yeah. Well, I think from Xbox's perspective, it's very valuable that they don't seem to care about games and they're not really interested in the games industry. maybe I'll do a video about AI and how they're all just, the market's just looking for companies doing AI. And when that falls on its face, we'll see where we are. But really appreciate y'all being here. Thanks for being in the chat. And tomorrow, I don't know what I'll talk about tomorrow. I'll see what I'll talk about. Maybe we'll do the Game Informer walkthrough tomorrow. But anyway, I really appreciate it. And I will see all of you in the next video. Have a wonderful day, y'all.